Good day, everyone. Eric Olsen from Helps YouTube Live. Good to have you here. Please tell me you can hear me. I have a brand new headset with Bluetooth. Hopefully it's working good. If it doesn't work, then I've got my old trusty one that I can plug back in. But I'd like to hear from you to make sure you can hear me okay. My name's Eric, attorney now for 46 years, the founder of Helps. Helps is a national law firm that represents seniors and disabled persons who receive protected income such as Social Security, pension, disability, VA benefits. In order to stop debt collector harassment, there's a federal law called the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act that provides if you're represented by an attorney, debt collectors have to leave you alone. And we also want our clients to know that their income, even if they're sued, their income in their bank account is protected. There's a federal rule went into effect in 2012 that instructs banks to automatically protect twice the amount of federal benefits, such as Social Security, deposited in your checking account from garnishment, regardless if there's other funds in there. So you're going to be fine. Okay. And the title today is Senior Struggling with Debt. Okay. Are you a senior struggling with debt? Our message is you don't need to worry. Okay. Because your income is safe. There's also state laws that protect your assets. And even if you have an asset that's over and above, like an asset, what's an asset? Like equity in a car, maybe some furniture, maybe a home. Even if you have equity in a property that's not protected under state law, that's over the exemption for the state where you live, over the amount that you're allowed to keep, it's not the practice of consumer judgment creditors to go after that property. They just go after that property. They don't do it. So you're going to be fine. And yeah, so I saw that one of the people on here got served with a Colleen, was it? Got served with a summons, and apparently maybe new with Helps. Yeah, you don't need to worry. When it helps clients get served with a summons or get legal papers, what we do is we ask them to get us a copy. We don't need all of it. We just need the first 2 or 3 pages. We need the name of the attorney and the account number and their phone number and the case number. And then what we do is we send a letter to the attorney who sued you, and we let the attorney know that your income is protected, that you're not going to go to court. We understand they're going to get a judgment, but they can't do anything to collect from you. Then we're going to call you on the phone, explain why you're okay and why you don't need to worry. You could get sued by 100 different creditors. It doesn't matter. Your judgment proof, your income is going to be protected. Okay. Looks like all my stuff got. Just a minute here, folks. I keep notes, and for some reason my notes got signed out. Now I got them back in. Okay, so things that we can talk about. If you have questions, please put them in the chat feature, and I'll address them. Okay, and if you're new to our Helps channel, we want to welcome you here. I'll try to answer your question. I can usually identify the questions. So Brian asked, do you have to file for exemptions in North Carolina? Every state is different. North Carolina does have a little bit of different procedures that you have to file for. We have information on how to do that. Okay, but you won't have a problem. So contact us so we can get you that information. A little too detailed to go over that with you here on this type of chat feature. Okay. So yesterday I talked about a change in credit reporting with medical debt, and I'm still right, but it looks like it's been delayed. Okay. What I explained yesterday is that there's a federal rule that's being put into effect that credit bureaus are no longer going to report delinquent credit card debt. Right now, I'm not credit card debt, delinquent medical debt. Right now, they don't report anything under $500, but eventually, if this rule goes through, uh, they're not going to report delinquent medical debt at all on your credit report, which could make a difference for a lot of people. Why isn't that? Because they found out that owing medical debt is not an indication of credit worthiness. And that makes sense to me for a lot of different reasons. And so what's happened is one of the credit bureaus or creditors represent the medical institutions filed a lawsuit to stop this. And so there's a hearing in front of the judge on July 28th. And it turns out that with the new administration, now the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which was the organization behind this change, their leader has said they're joining forces with the plaintiff who tried to put a stop to this. But other organizations have come in and taken the place of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and are going to try to get this rule changed. And I hope it does. It makes sense to have this rule changed, and it would result in a lot of people having their credit going up a little bit, especially if they have medical debt that's on their credit report. A lot of medical providers don't report on credit reports. Mostly the ones that report on credit reports for medical debt are the collection agency. Okay. So hopefully that will go into effect at the end of July. We'll see. We'll keep tabs on that. Okay. So someone called. Here's the note that I saw, and I put this to start with. This is this person called back regarding back taxes that she owes because she forgot to pay for a few years. She consulted with someone and followed the advice that was given, but the state has put a levy on her bank account. Okay. The only income she has is Social Security and her pension from a certain airline. The firm told her that they couldn't collect if she is on Social Security and retirement income, but she says the bank will not back off of the levy on her account. And then she wants us to call. Requested that I relay this to someone and text her. Okay, so here's the deal. You know, I've explained before, if you've been listening to me, that twice the amount of your Social Security deposit into a bank account or federal benefit like post office workers or federal employees, federal, you know, if you work for the federal government, you get a federal pension, VA, Veterans Association, or military pension is, you know, twice that amount you get each month deposited into a bank account is automatically protected from a garnishment in the event someone were to sue you and get a judgment. And that includes, it's also protected from a state income tax collector. So if you owe income taxes to your state, they can't garnish your Social Security or your pension. And twice the amount of your federal benefit deposit in your bank account, that sum is protected from garnishment automatically by your bank, regardless of what funds are in there or where they came from. So if this person, let's say they were in New Jersey, for example, I don't know where they're from, and they owe the New Jersey Department of Revenue $3,000. The New Jersey Department of Revenue, they filed a writ of garnishment on her bank account. Let's say it's Wells Fargo. Okay. What happens is Wells Fargo, they have 48 hours to look at the account and to determine if money came from a federal source like Social Security. In this case, their only income is Social Security. They take that and a pension from the airline she worked for. They take the amount she gets for the federal benefit to Social Security times 2. Let's say that's $1,800. 1,800 times 2 would be $3,600 in her bank account, would be protected from garnishment. Now she says that she was told the firm told her that they couldn't, but the bank will not back the levy off her account. Well, I've yet to talk to a bank manager in your local bank anywhere that understands this rule. But there's a department in the bank that deals with garnishments, and they know this rule. So that's what I'm going to tell this person when we call her back, or someone from Helps is going to explain to them that no, they're not going to take your money. The bank's going to protect it. If there ever was a problem, we'd communicate with the bank. And there wasn't, this rule went into effect in 2012, and that's the year PELP started. And so there was 4 or 5 years, 6 years. There was a lot of problems with a few banks and credit unions, but it's pretty much stopped now. They all know the rule, how the money's protected. Now, technically, the rule says the bank has 48 hours to examine the account to determine if it came from a federal source. Usually, they do that within 4 to 8 minutes. Okay, it's pretty easy to see. There's a code on the deposit, and all you have to do is, if it's a federal deposit, they can see that times it times two. As long as the amount in the account is less than that amount, rip up the garnishment. And a lot of banks have a nice form letter they send back to the person who did the garnishing, the creditor, and let them know that, hey, the income they have is totally protected. We're not honoring your garnishment. So, no, you don't need to worry if you owe state income taxes. They can't take money out of your account. Okay? I could think of a possible exception. That's maybe you work for your state and you've got a state pension that's coming out. I'm not talking about Social Security. I'm sorry about state pension. Uh, there might be a way that they could get at a state pension if it's the state where you live on. I've never seen that happen, but I've thought about it and think, there's probably there might be an exception for that. I've never seen it being a problem. Okay. So Colleen talked a little bit earlier about, being served with some legal papers by a sheriff's deputy. And I've talked about it before. If you're new, what happens if you do get sued? Someone knocks on your door and gives you some papers. Okay, and often it can be a sheriff's deputy, but he's not a criminal deputy. That every sheriff's department has a deputy that's assigned to serve legal papers, and he may have the uniform, probably doesn't carry a gun, and his job is to serve legal papers. His job isn't to arrest people or anything like that. So you don't need to be scared if it's a sheriff deputy. Don't worry. Okay. Um, so if you do worry about anything, you're supposed to call Helps. When you find out about Helps, you call us on the phone. We're going to go over your situation. We're going to save the information that you talked to us about. And you might call us 2, 3, 4, 5 times before you decide to enroll. And then when you enroll, we click a button and you're immediately going to get an email. When I say immediately, usually within a minute or sooner, maybe a little bit longer, but usually real quick. We're going to keep you on the phone. And the email says, welcome to Helps. And it confirms you're a member of Helps, that we're your attorney to receive communication regarding debt collectors. And an instruction how to get us the collectors. You can text them, fax them, email them, mail them to us, however you want. All we need is the name, address, and account number. We don't need the balance. And then our goal is within 24 to 48 hours to send out what's called a cease and desist letter to this creditor or collector to whom you owe money. Let them know that we represent you. And then under a law called the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, they have to communicate with us and not you. And if you've been sued, we need a copy of the summons or the paperwork that was served on you. We're going to contact the attorney, let them know your income is protected. We're going to call you, tell you why you don't need to go to court, why you don't need to worry. So that's what we do. We represent, and the magic of Help is that we represent you ongoing. It's not just one time. Okay, literally forever. So that we're your attorney, so you don't have to deal with these debt collectors. Now, why is that? Well, because it's very possible that if you owe money to one debt collector, they might sell the account to a new debt collector. So you might get a new notice from a different debt collector a year or 2 years down the road. And if that happens, you let us know. We'll send out a new letter to that new debt collector. You might not get sued for a couple of years. And if you get sued, we're going to tell you don't need to worry about it. You get us the paperwork. We're going to send a letter to the attorney who sued you. You're not going to need to go to court. You're going to be okay. Like Mary says here, I had several summons too, but here it is 3 years later, and I'm at peace because They never did anything about it. Helps took care of them. Yeah, that's what we do. You know, we used to have a motto. I don't know. Don't talk about it anymore, but motto was peace. You know, helps bring peace, bringing peace back to your life. That's what we do. It can be real stressful with creditors calling you, harassing you. You know, send you demand letters, and especially if you don't know what your rights are. And so when you enroll in Helps, you don't need to deal with these creditors anymore. If they were to call you, tell them, I'm represented by Helps. Here's their number, and they don't call me anymore and hang up the phone. Okay? And they're going to stop calling you. You know, when we send them that cease and desist letter, they know that under the law, they can't communicate with you anymore. The Hill had an article yesterday saying the department has paused any Treasury offset to Social Security for. Yeah, this is a whole thing that's in total flux. You know, offsets of Social Security. Okay, I haven't read that one. We'll try to get into that and keep you updated on for defaulted student loans. Yeah, it's just kind of complicated on how to get on what's called income-based repayment plan for student loans. There's different ways to do it. There's a real history of this. I won't go into it. Talked about it before. Bottom line, we're going to be there to help you. This person writes in, I'm struggling with paying my debt. I'm 65 years old. I lost my job in January of 23. I retired and took on a part-time job. And I had to quit that job because of medical issues. I applied for disability in November of 2023. I'm still waiting on a determination. It's a long time. I'm drowning in debt. My medical expenses are significant because of my health. My Social Security check will be further reduced by my health insurance premiums. I live in Florida. My home is paid off, and so is my car, but I have about $30,000 in debt, credit cards, and personal loans. I'm afraid that pretty soon I'll be faced with multiple judgments. Every month I find my bank account on overdraft. Can you help? What can I do? Well, first off, he's retired, so he's getting some retirement income. And then he's applied for some Social Security disability, and he's waiting for an award on that. So your retirement income's protected. Your Social Security is protected. Even if you get a lump sum, it's protected. Okay. You don't need to pay the $30,000 in credit card debt. You can stop paying that. And you live in Florida. Florida has pretty much an unlimited homestead exemption. It doesn't matter what your home is worth. It's going to be protected. Now, the exception would be if you have a bunch of acreage with it. Okay, so no, there's no problem with your home, and there's even a way that you can sell the home. If someone were to sue you and get a judgment, you can sell the home, have any judgment lien removed, and you get all the money from the sale of your home. So it doesn't matter how many judgments. If you got sued by all the creditors, it doesn't matter. You know, this guy, he's got $30,000 in debt. Let's say he's got 6 credit cards. Does that mean every one of the credit cards is going to sue him? No. Maybe none of them will sue him. Maybe 1 would, 2 would. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if they all sue him because all his income is going to be protected. His assets are going to be okay. Now he's got a free and clear car. You know, Florida has a limited amount of equity that's protected for a car, but it's not the practice of a consumer judgment creditor in any state, including Florida, go after a car, even if you have equity in it over and above the exemption where you live. There's a lot of reasons for that. Maybe own it with a spouse and their name is on the car too. It's really complicated to try to repossess a car unless you got your name on the title. You're a car lender. So no, he doesn't need to worry about losing his car. Okay, he's not gonna. So when he asks, I find myself bank on overdraft. Well, you don't need to pay the credit cards anymore. Maybe that'll help. And then, can you help? Yeah, we can help. We can help stop these creditors from harassing you anymore, and we'll be there to answer your questions. What can I do? Well, you really don't need to do anything. You enroll in help, so we're going to do it all for you so that you don't need to deal with these creditors anymore. So Tiger Eyes asked, I have a creditor calling me every day. They filed a judgment and helps told them to stop calling. They call every day. Well, okay. Uh, let me answer ask the question. Okay. Uh, when we send a cease and desist letter out, I tell people it usually takes maybe 2 to 4 weeks before that to get processed and for them to stop the contact. Okay. Now, uh, there are some creditors, you know, earlier today, I got on the internet and I started looking at payday loans. And I typed in tribal payday loans. And the list goes on and on. I could show it to you on the computer here of all these Indian tribes that have payday loans. Like that's a big deal to get a payday loan from an Indian tribe. Well, why do the tribes have payday loans? Why do they have that as their little business? Okay. Well, because they're not part of the United States in some ways. The laws aren't. They're not. Some federal laws don't apply to them, including the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, which means if you owe money on a payday loan to an Indian tribe, then they're probably not going to sue you. It doesn't matter if they do, but they can call and threaten you and break the law by telling you things that aren't true to try to collect the debt. Now, it's the same thing for overseas payday loans. I typed in overseas payday loans and a lot of things popped up like, oh boy, I can get a payday loan from Russia or from some other country overseas. Why is that? Well, because same reason. They can break the law. If you don't pay them, then they're going to call and they're going to tell you you're going to be arrested, or we're sending a sheriff to arrest you, and they can try to, or they can call, and if we send them a cease and desist letter, they're going to ignore us. Okay, because they know what they can't be sued. They're either on an Indian reservation or they're overseas. So Tiger Eyes, you can call us, talk to us. We'll talk to you about this. Occasionally, we have to send a second letter to a creditor, and these creditors can be sued if they if they violate the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act. Helps is eventually going to start doing that. We hired a new attorney specifically for that reason because there's not enough attorneys suing these companies violating the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act. We're going to have to start doing it. If they get sued a few times, they have to pay attorney fees and they have to pay some other money. And so they don't like to do that. So the law has to be enforced. I blocked the number. They are calling from different numbers now. Well, you don't need to pick it up. Some people, if they get a number, they don't know where it's from. They just don't even answer the phone. And they're different. We'll talk to you about it. Okay. I doubt it's American Express. Tony Soprano or Vito is going to knock on your door. Well, I could tell you some stories though. Okay. It depends, but I don't want to scare anyone because there's no reason to be scared. Okay. So I talked to someone this morning, and what it was it? She had got a letter in the mail from someone, and I immediately recognized what it was. An advertisement letter from a law firm advertising bankruptcy because she had been sued. And some law firms subscribe to a service that lets them know if someone's been sued. Then they send an advertisement letter saying, "Hey, we noticed you were sued. We can represent you in bankruptcy," or something like that. That's what they say. She didn't need to file bankruptcy. And some of our clients sometimes tell me they get a half a dozen of these letters. It depends where you live. There's competition among bankruptcy attorneys. Doesn't matter. Attorneys can advertise now. Okay. Um, when I first started practice back in 1978, the phone book for attorneys in the town where I first started to practice out, which was Salem, Oregon, had on the yellow pages, they had all the attorneys, and all they had was their name and their number. Nothing else. Nothing else. Okay. Now, okay, so here's a brief history you might find interesting. I was a brand new attorney, started out on myself. I'd worked for a firm and as a law clerk and decided that I wanted to practice in my hometown and I didn't want to work for someone. I wanted to work for myself, which was a wise decision on my part. And I remember the year after I started practice, or it was that year, the law changed and they said attorneys can advertise now. Now that's growing over time, but so I remember what I did. When the yellow page came out, I put a little half-inch thing in there, and all I said was initial consultation, no charge. I thought to myself, I don't want to have people coming into me, talking to me, charging them. If I can't help, I want to be able to talk to them on the phone and say, see if I can figure. So I wanted to consult with them on the phone, and if I could help them, then they could come in and we could make an arrangement. My phone blew up because I was the only attorney on the yellow page that had this little ad in there that said initial consultation. So people would look for an attorney, and all of a sudden they'd see this. I can call this guy, and he's not going to charge me for calling. And I've always felt that I hate the concept of attorneys charging for time because attorneys that charge for time, they almost have a built-in conflict of it. The more time they put on a case, they just bill the hours and stuff. It takes away your incentive to be efficient. Okay, if you could solve a problem in 10 minutes, why do you need to spend an hour doing it or 2 hours doing it? Just solve it in 10 minutes and boom. So anyway, that's why if you get a letter advertising for bankruptcy, it means you're probably being sued. And I told her, I said, you're going to get served with papers down the road. Get us a copy of the paperwork. You don't need to worry. She was kind of relieved when I talked to her. Okay. There's a window company offering windows and no payments for 2 years. So what if the time comes and I can't afford the payments or they are way too high? Can the company put a lien on the home? Well, they probably have. They already put a lien on the home. Not they put a lien on the window. It's called a UCC lien. Okay, and that's a lien that could be a lien on the home for like 5-6 years, something like that. Um, so it gets a little complicated. They couldn't repossess the windows because they're installed in the home. So you have to talk to us about that. So this person says, hello, my name is, I'm a senior citizen who is in debt for like 25,000 with credit cards. Last year I enrolled with a debt relief company and I'm still struggling. I'm thinking about bankruptcy, but my income is tight. I'm overwhelmed. I called the debt relief program to let them know about my concerns. I own my home and receive a pension from a job and Social Security from my deceased husband. I fear of losing my home because of possible lawsuits if I cancel my debt program. You're not going to lose your home. We're going to talk to you about this. You know, I talk about debt management and debt relief companies a lot. Even this morning, I got on there. What was the name of Insight or something like that? And I looked at their article. Their article was 99%, everything was on, but the one thing they left out was the fact that, hey, your Social Security is protected and you could be protected from debt collectors. They didn't tell them that. Okay. So these debt management companies and debt settlement companies, they give you a lot of facts, but they leave out the most important thing seniors need to know. The fact is that your income is safe and protected, and you don't need to pay the debt. You can use the money for your food and your medicine, and you can be protected from collector harassment. So we'll call this person back, and we'll tell them. First thing we'll say is, when you enrolled with this debt management or debt settlement company, did they tell you, by the way, your income is protected? You don't need to pay this debt. And the answer will be, no, they didn't tell me that. Well, of course they didn't tell you that. If they told you that, you wouldn't have enrolled with them. So if you're wrapped up with a debt settlement company, a debt management company, and you got a payment you can't afford, and they never told you that, you've essentially, I think it's a form of fraud, because they withhold valuable information from you for your financial benefit, for their financial gain. And no, you're not going to lose your home with a lawsuit. No. Okay, this person writes in, they say, I'm 70 years of age. My only income is Social Security at this time. I have 2 credit cards that went into collections. I receive phone calls from these debt collectors on an almost daily basis. I also had a Dodge truck that was repossessed 2 years ago that was financed through Chrysler Financial. They claim that I owe them $4,000, which I cannot afford to pay. You're going to be fine. Your Social Security is protected. If you know, if you enroll in helps, what you're going to do is you're going to give us the credit card you owe money to. You're going to give us this deficiency you owe on this car that got repossessed. We're going to send out cease and desist letters. They're not going to bother you anymore. If you got sued, we're going to contact them and let them know your income's protected. You're not going to have to go to court. You're going to be fine. And we're going to represent you ongoing. If other debt you forgot about pops out of the woodwork, you get it to us. Okay, and we'll send them a cease and desist letter. And we'll be there literally forever. So if you get contacted or sued 2, 3, 4 years down the road, we're going to be there. We represent you ongoing, so you don't have to deal with collectors anymore. Larry has a good idea. I've never thought of that. You can read that comment he puts on there. If they sue you and get a judgment, how long does that stay on your credit? Simply Social ask. Well, I got good news for you. It's not on your credit. Since about 2018, 2019, lawsuits and judgments do not appear on credit reports anymore. Okay? And you've probably, if you've been listening to me for a while, you've heard me tell you this before, but that's okay. We get new people on here all the time. That's what I'm here for. Why aren't they on your credit report anymore? Well, they used to be, but what I think happened is the credit bureau started getting sued by people that were having loans put in, and they were buying a house or something, and all of a sudden, a credit report showed that they'd been sued, that there was a judgment that they, and so that stopped the loan from going through. And then when they reapplied for the loan, their interest went higher, and so they said, "Wow, the credit bureau made a mistake. They reported that on my credit report, and now I have to pay more interest. It's going to amount to a lot of money over the next 30 years." When they made a mistake. And so what the credit bureaus did, I'm sure this is exactly what happened. They said, okay, we're tired of getting sued. We're not going to report lawsuits or judgments anymore on credit reports. We're only going to report what people tell us. That way, if we get sued, we can pass the buck onto the creditor that gave us the bad information. And so they don't report lawsuits or judgments. They don't report tax liens on your credit report anymore. Why? Well, because a lot of times your person pays off the tax lien and it doesn't get removed from the credit report right away. And then if that fouled you up and getting a loan, then you'd be mad at the credit reporting bureau. And there's enough attorneys out there that probably someone willing to sue them. So they said, we're not going to report this anymore. So it's kind of good news. Okay. Okay. You know, this ABLE account, let's talk about that. No, I've never seen an ABLE account get garnished. Uh, it's like a retirement in a lot of ways. When I talk about twice the amount being protected, I'm talking about that being protected, federal benefits like Social Security and a bank account being protected. I'm talking about that being protected automatically by the bank. If you had more than twice the amount in there, it's still protected, just not automatically. So if you got 1,500 in Social Security, 3,000 is in the protected automatically. Twice the amount you get each month. Let's say for whatever reason you had 4,000 in the account and you got a writ of garnishment. Well, the $1,000 would be held up, and then you have to file a challenge of garnishment or claim of exemption, paperwork with the court, and the court would order that be released. Now, occasionally that happens with a helps client, not very often, but if it does, then we tell them what to do. We give them the information, and then we'll contact the attorney that did the garnishing and give them the proof that the income that's in there that's being subject to the garnishment is still exempt. And 19 out of 20 times they release it. Client never has to worry about going and telling that to a judge. But you can solve that problem from ever happening by just keeping less than twice the amount in your Social Security. But I don't see a problem with an ABLE account. Okay. Wow. Miss H says, I got a letter from a law group asking if I worked in an area around a certain company that released pollution in the area. Did I have or ever have cancer? Wants me to fill out a form and sign. Yeah, that's part of advertising. That law firm is advertising for clients. I mean, uh, there are rules about advertising that attorneys must follow. When I was a brand new attorney, I remember I got a call from another attorney in town and said, Eric, I want to let you know what happened. I said, what happened? He says, well, my client was in a wreck, and this man jumped out of the car and ran over and gave him one of your cards. Well, who was the man that gave him one? It was my dad. That's solicitation. You're not allowed to do that, but you can send general advertisements out to a group. But you can't go to a particular person unless you know them and a third party knows them. You can refer that, but that was wrong. Okay, so I told my dad, I said, don't do that again, Dad. I don't need your help. You get me in trouble. I never asked him to do that. He just did that on his own. Do you take out cash over twice the amount as your Social Security? Also, if they was not so greedy. Um, yeah, that's interesting. Okay, we'll talk about Simply Social. We'll talk about that for a second. Okay. Yeah, if you have over twice the amount, most of our clients, when I say that, they tell me, I never have more than twice the amount in my account, Eric. And I say, well, that's fine. But you can withdraw it. You don't need any, and so that's less than twice the amount, but you don't need to worry about that unless you've been sued. But talking about the interest rate on credit cards, you've heard of usury laws. That goes from the Bible. Um, it starts from the Bible. In other words, and then in the old times, there was limits on how much you could charge as interest. Okay. Uh, and then even Shakespeare wrote about it, right? Guy couldn't pay his interest. What did he do? He got a pound of flesh and he wanted the guy's heart. What was the Shakespeare story? Anyway, that's the pound he wanted. So anyway, uh, usury laws. Well, this is kind of interesting. Usury laws are state specific. Some states, they have laws you can only charge this much interest. So, but some states, they don't have usury laws. I think like North Dakota, South Dakota, Delaware, there's a few of these states. And because of that, banks will set up their credit card department in that state where there's no usury law. And the federal law says, okay, if your headquarters are in this state for your credit card company, for your banking, then you could still do business in other states and charge the higher interest rate. So that's how they get away with these horrendous 25, 35% interest rates. They set up in a state that doesn't have a usury law. My dad was trying to help. That's right. I will say this. I credit a lot of my experience and my practical knowledge to my dad. He was the epitome of practical knowledge. Okay. Most of them don't have a kind heart like you do. I don't know. There's a lot of them that do have a kind heart. I don't know. I did my first bankruptcy within like 3 months of starting practice in 1978, and then after about 8 years in 1986, I just decided to do nothing but bankruptcy because I talked to so many people that needed help. And so over the years, I talked to a lot of people with financial struggles, and so you talk to people who are struggling financially, it has to affect your heart. And most bankruptcy attorneys that do a lot of these cases are compassionate and they try to help people. Okay, that's what I found. Like Kathy says, you're right, Kathy. Most, it's gone. Yeah, Delaware is one of those. You bet. Okay, here's one. Here's a note from someone. It says, person called and connected with, and she got a call from someone saying they were going to sue her for a cash advance loan from 2018, and that they would see her in court on Friday. But she said, I've never been served with papers. And she asked, is this a scam, right? And yes, it is a scam. Okay. Anyone who threatens you like that, they're scammers. We'll talk to anyone about a scam, whether you're a member of HELPS or not. If you got a question, give us a call. We'll go over it with you. So here I made notes. Several states, including South Dakota, Delaware, Maine, have weak or no usury laws, meaning there are no caps on interest rates. That can be beneficial for lenders in those states as they're not restricted by specific interest rate limits. However, consumers in those states may be disadvantaged if lenders choose to charge a higher interest rate. So yeah, it's easy for these lenders to get around the usury laws. They just set up in one state and they can loan anywhere else as long as they're in the state where they're headquartered in doesn't have any usury law. Eric, the reason that you would do a bankruptcy is if you own a car or property. Is there any reason to file? I'm 61 years old and do not own. No. Well, we have videos that talk about when it makes sense to file bankruptcy, but yeah, owning a car or property would not generally be a reason to file bankruptcy. In fact, it could get you in kind of a briar's patch. Let me explain. So let's say you got a car that's worth $10,000. Let's say it's free and clear. In the state where you live, the exemption for that you're allowed to have an equity in a car is $5,000. So if you went to a bankruptcy attorney to file bankruptcy, the attorney would say, well, you can't file bankruptcy. Your car's worth too much money. The trustee's going to take it. Okay, but you can file what's called a Chapter 13, and we'll pay back the creditors that excess equity, and you'll be able to keep the car. Okay, so they put you in a Chapter 13, charging you $4,000 at least in attorney fees, and then you got to pay by maybe three or 4,000 back to the creditors for the equity in the car. But you're never told is if you didn't do anything, a creditor would never go after that equity in that car. They just won't do it. Okay, so you don't need to file bankruptcy at all. Bankruptcy can, there's just a lot of reasons for why seniors don't need to file bankruptcy. There are a few exceptions, but not many. So does an order for a judgment just bypass the whole trial and go straight as a? Yeah, that's right. So if someone sues you and you don't file an answer and you owe the money, then they're eventually going to get what's called a default judgment, and that's just an order saying you owe the money. Okay, and you know you don't need to worry about it. If you're a member of HELPS, we've already contacted the attorney, let him know that your income is protected and you're not going to do anything about it. That's usually the end of it. Now, if you got some more paperwork, you get it to us. We tell you what to do. But you don't need to go to court. You don't need to worry about that. And my headset is wireless. And I hope it's better because I've had a lot of complaints with this stupid one here. So hopefully it works. I signed a notarized paper. Yeah, sometimes people call me and they'll say, well, I got sued and I agreed to make payments. And they think that they're still under requirement to keep making that payment if they enroll in HELPS. No, you can stop making that payment. No, if there's a judgment against you, you've made arrangements to make payments, you can stop. You don't need to keep paying it. Okay? So Colleen says, I just received a very informative email from Kaisa Jansen. She's an attorney from HELPS concerning the summonses. Thank you so much, Eric, and help seeing it in writing with such detail. Stress eases my stress. Yeah, we have hundreds of emails that are preloaded on different topics that we send to clients with links to videos or articles and stuff, or non-clients, okay? And that's what you got. Yeah. So not only do we talk to people on the phone, we're going to give them the information, they see it in black and white. Don't want you to worry. And I'm supposed to remind you to press the like button. If you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, do that. I get down at the bottom, you can press subscribe. Anything, by liking us, it makes it more likely that this gets shared with others and more people find out about HELPS and what we do. I always forgot to charge my wireless headset. Well, I don't want to forget here. But if I were to forget and if it went out, I would just take this other one and plug it back in. But I don't want that to happen. So this person contacts us and says, I get Social Security widow's benefits. Can it be garnished? I have a lot of medical debt, over $40,000. It doesn't matter what type of Social Security you get, it's protected. I don't care if it's Social Security disability, it's called SSI, widow's benefits, whatever it is, regular Social Security, it's protected. Twice the amount in your bank account is protected automatically from garnishment. Yeah. So this person, they write in, they say, how do you enroll in HELPS? Would it cost me anything? Well, okay. You can get on our web page and it talks about HELPS. If you want to just get on www.helpsishere.org. We got a great web page. You could spend hours on it. Okay, lots of articles, links to videos. Maybe anywhere from 1 out of 5 to 1 out of 7 of our clients get our help for free. Those that pay a very minimal amount. We do have a guideline for fees. For persons that have income over a certain amount, the most they would pay would be $40 for 24 months, then $20 for 24 months, then free, or $30 for 24 months, $15 for 24 months, then free thereafter, or $20 for 24 months, $10 for 24 months, free thereafter. And you don't have to make any payment up front with helps. When we enroll people, they don't pay us any money. Normally the money would be paid through their debit card after 30 to 60 days. Okay? So that's the nice thing about helps. You can enroll, you don't have to pay any money. You can enroll immediately. You just call us on the phone, we go over this stuff. Now, we never put any pressure on anyone to enroll in helps. We don't need to. We don't charge enough money to do that. That's not what we do. The only reason we charge anything is because, we got to support. We got a big staff. We send out a lot of letters, electronic stuff like that. So headset is clear as a bell. Oh, I like hearing that. So this person says, I'm 67 and reside in the state of New Jersey. I'm on SSI and my wife is on Social Security disability. I'm considering bankruptcy due to my credit card debt. My two sons purchased the property we all live in because the house is in a 55 plus community. My wife and I had to be added to the deed and are considered non-borrowing purchasers. My sons were the sole financial contributors in the purchase of this home and are on the mortgage. So my question is, if I filed for bankruptcy or just stop paying on my credit cards and have the cease and desist letter sent out, could this in any way affect my sons as owners of the property? No. The only way it could be affected is if you go to sell the home, then it could be a problem. But if your plan is to stay in the home, then when you pass away, the property would automatically be in your son's name. Any judgments against you, a judgment lien would disappear or drop off. So there won't be any problem. No one's going to take the home. Now, is bankruptcy an issue? You probably don't even need to file bankruptcy. That's what we'd be telling you. We'd talk to you about it. So I talked earlier about these tribal loans and internet loans, or over the internet. A lot of them are based overseas or not in it. The reason they did that is so they could skew the law and they could use strong arm tactics to try to get people to pay. And then of course they charge horrendous interest rates, just horrendous. Okay. Yeah, Merchant of Venice, right. Okay, I know you say when paying helps and a person passes away after paying for 2 years and a family may need your help, will help still be there? Absolutely. You know, because we represent a lot of seniors and we represent them forever, eventually all our clients pass away, right? Yeah. We've got clients in their 90s. I think we've had clients in their hundreds too. But anyway, um, yeah, a lot of times we'll get calls from a child and they say, yeah, I knew my parents were with helps. They passed away. We're getting these credit card bills. What do we do with them? Or we're getting notices. We tell them what to do. Uh, um, well, sometimes we'll say, if you get a credit card notice or a notice about your parent passing away, just get a copy of the death certificate right on there. There's no estate, because most of our clients don't really have an estate when they pass away. No estate, no probate, and then just staple it to the credit card bill or the notice you got from the credit card company and send it back. So yeah, we talked to, who is Evergreen Financial, something with Phil Tigerone? Yes. I think that's one of Phil's businesses. I think what he does as a business does debt counseling for people that are filing bankruptcy. So I'm going to read this. This isn't a question, but it's kind of a nice little email we got from someone. They said, I enjoy your show and you are a breath of fresh air in my new wife. We got married 8 weeks ago. Well, we've been together for 10 years. Now that brings up a good question. You know, and I haven't talked about this for a long time. You know, if you're married, if you're married for at least a year and you pass away, one of you passes away, the survivor is going to get the higher of the two Social Security benefits. So sometimes I've talked to someone, maybe the woman is getting $800 in Social Security, the man's getting 2,000, and they're not married. I'll say, get married. I don't care. That way, the man's likely to pass away before the wife, and if you're married for at least a year, she's going to get 2,000 in Social Security. But if you're not married, she's just going to get that measly $800. Okay. Yeah, payday loans are illegal in North Carolina. Yeah, but if it's a internet payday loan, you can get them over the internet. And same with a Indian reservation because they're not covered under federal law. Okay. Oh my gosh, time has flown. I can't believe how fast this goes. Okay, got 3 minutes to go. I think we're going to be done for the day. I want to thank you for participating. Please press the like button. I'll be here tomorrow and then Thursday, same time. If you have any questions that we haven't covered, be sure and call us. Okay? I promise you'll be glad you did. We're really nice when you call. We don't want you to worry. So give us a call. You're going to be fine. God bless and have a great day, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.